Hello and welcome to a video detailing how to set up an environment for CrossWorlds. So this is documented on the OpenNTF wiki in the CrossWorlds space under the setup area, and there's a few steps. The first one around setting up Eclipse, because the development environment is Eclipse, and that's also where we're going to be triggering our Liberty server from and deploying applications and managing our Liberty server from there. There's a set of very useful there's a very useful plugin with a load of tools for managing Liberty from Eclipse, and then installing the CrossWorlds source code and the feature to the Liberty server, and setting up the OpenNTF Domino API demo application for it. So just a bit of background about CrossWorlds. So WebSphere Liberty is a lightweight Java EE application server. So it's similar to Apache Tomcat, for example. It's free for development and test and limited production use, and it can be managed completely through Eclipse, which makes it very easy to get working with as a developer, and it's a nice, simple server if you've come from the Domino background. As you'll see, the actual the installation of it is as quick, if not quicker, than Domino, and configuration is pretty easy as well. So I'll run through the various steps here and show actually setting it all up. So first off is Eclipse, and that's just installed from the Eclipse website. You can download it as a zip file, or if you're on Windows, there is now a Windows installer for 64-bit Windows. So that's what I'm going to use. It just makes it a lot easier to install. Not that installing Eclipse is in any way hard. So we just click on the installer exe, and this opens up. And the version of Eclipse that we need is the Eclipse IDE for Java EE developers. We get a list of various IDEs, and it's this Java EE developers one. So then we just need to define a path for the install to be saved to. You can have lots of versions of Eclipse running at the same time, and I've found that it's easier and more flexible to have my workspace folder and Eclipse and any servers that are running from it all in the same folder. So I'll create a CrossWorlds folder, and within that, no, we don't need the Eclipse folder. It will automatically add that Eclipse folder. I don't want a start menu option, but I will create a desktop shortcut. And that's all you need to do to install Eclipse. This is now going off to the Eclipse website, downloading what it needs, and installing it. So although extracting a zip file is not hard in any way, this just makes it easier to select the relevant option automatically. And it's now launched. It's now installed, so we'll launch it. If you've come from a Domino background, you'll be aware that for Domino development there is only one workspace folder, and that's it's not configurable about where you can store that. It's installed under the notes directory itself. But as I say, I prefer to keep separate installations of Eclipse for separate purposes. So I've got one for plugin development, one for Notes client plugin development, one for uh, Darwin, for example, and then this one for CrossWorlds. So I'll make a workspace folder in the Eclipse folder, and I'll then just select that. And because that's the only workspace folder that I'm going to be using, it's just for CrossWorlds development. I can just use that as the default, and I don't need to ask again. So this is now launching Eclipse. Once this opens, we'll want to install some plugins. So we go to the Eclipse Marketplace. We're going to install two plugins. The first one is going to be for Liberty. So we just enter Liberty in the find, and it's the we're not doing any server migration, so that one's not relevant. There's one just for Eclipse tooling for Bluemix, but we want the WebSphere application server Liberty developer tools. This allows us to set up WebSphere Liberty servers from Eclipse, so it's the kind of full version. So we click to install that, and you'll notice that when this expands, you can then select the Bluemix tooling as well. We're going to install one other one, which is Vardin. This is just because the OpenNTF Domino API plugin is web application is using Vardin. So we select that, and it's all set up now. Vardin Designer is a drag and drop WYSIWYG editor for Vardin. It is available on a trial basis, or if you've got the Pro Tools, then you'll have the full license for that. So you can deselect that if you don't want that. So we'll confirm those, and now it's installing. It's just getting ready to install those plugins. So setting up the environment is pretty straightforward. It's just a case of selecting those two plugins from the marketplace. If you've got any settings set up elsewhere, then you could use those as well. And getting settings out from one Eclipse workspace and into another, it's just a case of going to File, Export, and then you select the settings file, the settings option to export, and then you can export those preferences and import them back in. So we've got the licenses here, all the various licenses for Vardin Limited and for WebSphere Liberty. And now it's just running off and installing those. We get the warning that it's unsigned content. That's fine. I'm not quite sure which one that is, but that's now then installed those plugins, and it's just a case of restarting Eclipse. So in our CrossWorlds folder, now we've got all of those. We've got the full workspace there. The one other setting that you'll probably want to configure, you certainly will if you're building, if you're adding OpenNTF Domino API in, is the various Java versions. With Domino, you'll get Java 1.6, but other versions can be installed, and you're going to want the JDK. So it's just a case of going to the Oracle website, downloading the JDK. It's very straightforward to do that. So in my preferences now, I just want to add references to those installed Java runtimes. So we just map to those JRE to those JDK folders and finish. It will have added the default one that you've got installed, that's referenced by the Java_home environment variable, but you can add multiple others. And if you want to use the 1.6 one with Domino, I think you can navigate down to the relevant folder. You may need the JDK. It's been a while since I did that. So if you're unsure, then just download the JDK. And that's basically configured Eclipse. So next we'll just get rid of that welcome page and just go to full screen. Now we're going to install and configure WebSphere Liberty. So we're in the Java EE perspective. If you've come from, if you've only developed with plugins before, you may not be familiar with this. The markers view, that's basically like the problems pane. So we can just configure those contents, and we'll just rename that just to errors and only show severities that are error on any element in the same project, because otherwise it will just throw absolutely everything in there. We've got a snippets panel, and the main one that you'll be using is the service area. We've got a local web preview server there. Really, if you're going to do any development, you'll want to add some kind of other server on there. Now that we've got the Liberty plugin, if we right click and go to new server, then we've got an option for WebSphere application server Liberty. So we can select that. I think one of the when we get into it a bit further, I think it's expecting profile, so I just add that on here. WebSphere Liberty used to be called WebSphere Liberty Profile. It's now just WebSphere Liberty, but you can point it to an existing Liberty installation. We're going to install it from an archive or a repository, in this case a repository, and we can define which JRE we're going to use. We create, we choose where we want to install it to. So as I mentioned, I'm kind of creating a self-contained area here, a self-contained CrossWorlds environment. So I'm creating a Liberty folder under CrossWorlds, and then we can download it from ibm.com. So we don't even need to download anything in advance. It's the Java EE 7 web profile that we want. and then there are various additional content that you can install. You can always install those and download those at a later date. Um, One that you might want, for example, is the OSGI console. Um, it's not particularly required for OpenNTF Domino API at all, um, but sorry, for the OpenNTF Domino API demo database, um, but it's one that may be useful for troubleshooting at a later date. It's finally got to them all. So there's various things that you can add in for bean validation, all sorts of various options. But we'll just skip those for the moment. Accept the terms of the license agreement. We can give the server a name. I just stick with the default of default server. We haven't got any resources that we want to make available to it, so we just finish. And this is now downloading the WAS Liberty files and installing them. Again, if you wanted to do this without using the Eclipse wizard, then it's just a zip file that you extract, same as you would with Eclipse, but the plugins just make it slightly easier to install that. And I think you probably agree that this is at least as easy to install as the Domino server, probably easier. So once this has installed, we're also going to be pulling in the CrossWorlds files, and here we're saving or creating the server at a specific location in this Liberty folder. For development, same as for plugin development, you have a target platform. Target platform in this case will be Liberty. If you've used the XPages SDK in Eclipse, then you'll know that you specify the target platforms, the links off to Eclipse there, the links off to Domino rather, and it creates a target platform which pulls in all the relevant jar files. When we pull in the CrossWorlds files, that will also have a target platform. We've got nothing in there at the moment, just that running platform, but it will pull in a target platform that uses a variable to identify where the Liberty installation is, and that's going. So we go to run, debug, and string substitution. Add a new one. Call it WAS Liberty root, and point it to the root folder of Liberty. That means that all of the target platform stuff is just soft coded. WebSphere Liberty, like Domino, is extensible, so we're just going to add some folders so that we can add in features. In Domino, if you're looking at the folder structure, then that's in the OSGI folder, lib ext, I think. But so here it's just extension created at this top level alongside servers and shared, and then another folder called lib. that's also then on the that's in the folder structure as well. So we're doing it parallel. We're updating folders in this Liberty folder from Eclipse, and those are under user, and then there's extension and lib. And similarly, under servers, we've got that default server and various files. So next we're going to need to we just need to go to the server properties. So we've got this server.env file. Sometimes you'll get that created, sometimes not. If it's not created, then go to New, Server Environment File, and you can select it there. If it's already created, then it's not selectable. This is a strange one. Sometimes it creates the file with that max perm size set, sometimes it doesn't. But what we do need in there is something to tell it where to find our Domino install. Because CrossWorlds is basically acting as a web server in front of Domino, it needs to know where the Domino files are, which for a typical install will be C program files, IBM Domino. You can also point it to a notes client, and there's details of what needs setting for that on the wiki. The next thing that we need is to create the bootstrap.properties file. This is where we'll configure that CrossWorlds is supposed to run in developer mode across the whole server. You can set it on an application by application basis, but in this case we'll just set it across the whole server. And if you're pointing to a notes client install, then this is where you would define the user ID password, and that's again all set up on all documented on the wiki. And finally, we'll just edit the server.xml. So this is basically your configuration for the Liberty server. So the HTTP endpoint, for example, defines which ports to use for this installation. So you can have multiple Liberty servers running on the same laptop. I've had various different versions and give them each different port names. There's documentation up on Developer Works about setting up a self-signed certificate for SSL. It's all fairly straightforward, and you can change the timeout. Sometimes I've found that Liberty doesn't start up within that timeout if you've got a lot of applications there, so you can extend that here. At the server configuration level, this is where you can add various other options. So in the screenshots on the wiki, then you'll see that I've got things like application monitoring added there, and logging. There's all sorts of various configuration add-ons you can add on there. We don't actually need any of them. What we will need is to add some additional features. So again, I'm just going on the ones that were set up on my initial installation of CrossWorlds. So the CDI, the context and dependency injection, JAX RS for servlet management, and local connector. And that's then configured the basics of our Liberty server. So setting up and configuring it are all very straightforward. So now for CrossWorlds itself, I've got the I've downloaded my development branch. I'll clean that up and publish that shortly. I'm going to need to go through and put all the various Apache license references in all the various files, so it'll take a little bit of time, but you can get that latest download from GitHub. So we need to pull in the various projects. It's going to be these 5. Domino dependencies is where you add in jar files for notes in Domino. ODA is where you add in the jar files for OpenNTF Domino API. Core is the core code that CrossWorlds uses to basically add a filter on all requests for applications that include the J2EE enabler jar file. And then the feature is just a feature project, same as in an OSGI plugin, just a feature project which is what will be installed to the Liberty server. So we'll import existing projects and we'll point to that folder. We don't need the docs and the distro, so it's just those other files. In theory, I'm not sure if you need the J2E enabler. I needed at one point to add it on there, otherwise I got an error. I'll show you that there are other ways of actually adding in the configuration, and when we look at that J2E enabler, then it'll be clear what it's actually doing. So we'll copy those projects into the workspace and press F5 just to refresh those. Now at this point it's now building the workspace because we've got build automatically switched on, and you'll get a lot of errors. It's not a problem, it's not something to be concerned about, and I'll just run through those now. So the first one to deal with is the domino dependencies. In the manifest, we're basically showing various dependencies, and in the let's just look, I think probably at the build path. Yep, it's expecting 5 jar files from your notes directories. They can't be distributed, so it's just a case of going in and manually copying and pasting them. It's very straightforward. So program files, IBM, and these are available in the notes client as well as on the server. So the first one is in JVM lib ext, and this is the notes.jar, and we just drag it to the bundle content folder. If it's the first time that you've done that, then it'll prompt you whether you want to copy the files or link to the files, and you can configure the drag and drop settings. We just want to copy them. and you'll see it automatically jumps up to the top level as well as in there because it's already in the build path. So it's already added to the build path. It just needs adding to that bundle content folder because that's where it's expecting to find it. The next two are in OSGI, RCP, Eclipse plugins. And it's the two com.ibm.icu ones. Again, just drag and drop them. And then it's the OSGI shared Eclipse plugins. First one is in com.ibm.commons_901 whatever, and that's lwpd.commons.jar. And then the final one is in the NAPI project. Bundle content, and that's got rid of all our errors. So it's a very straightforward bit of configuration of that. The next one to fix is ODA. This is even easier. So we go to our build.properties file, and there's two variables there. So I'm going to point it to my Git repository for OpenNTF Domino API. Alternatively, you can just download the latest version, and you want to point to the plugins folder. The one thing, very important thing to remember, is that it doesn't like backslashes in the build process, so you need to change those to forward slashes. If you have backslashes, then it will fail to import. So just remember to change those. And then the other thing is to get the timestamp from any of the core ODA files. So I'll just select formula, but org.opentf.domino XSP could equally be used. And then just save the build.properties. So this is telling it where to go to find the plugins and which version timestamp to look for. And then it's just a case of running the build.xml. We need to run as ant build ... because we need to tell it to run with a GIRE that's above 1.6. Doesn't matter which one. So I'll show it running with 1.7. If you don't choose the right GRE version, then it will fail. There it runs, copying them and build successful. If we then press F5 just to refresh, we've got them all in there. We've still got one error there. That's just because it's expecting a source folder. Version control doesn't like empty folders, so there's nothing in that source folder, so it's not up in the source control repository. So it's just a case of pulling that in there, and then that one too has cleared all of its errors. What we've still got is some errors on core. That's because, as I mentioned, the target platform. Now we've got a target platform included in the code there. So if I just open that with with the XML editor, then you can see that it's got that was_liberty_root variable, which is what we declared earlier in the preferences in run debug and string substitution. Now we just need to select that target platform, um, and it's automatically been added in here because it's available in the workspace. So we just select it, apply, OK, and all our errors are gone. So it looks scary for a start with a lot of errors there, but it's very straightforward to clear all of those. Then it's a case of installing the feature. Now I'm not sure if it's because of the uh, that target platform, or because I've already run it on this PC on various occasions. But when I go to install feature, it says that it's already installed. If you get that, then just update feature, and that then installs it to the Liberty server. If we press F5, then we can see the feature with all of those jars is now installed on the Liberty server. So it's all very straightforward. That's now available for the server. It's not yet enabled for the server. So we just need to go to the feature manager again, add, and then all of those user specific features are prefixed with USR, all those ones in extension lib folder. So just use USR to filter those, and OK to install it and save. And that's now our CrossWorlds server set up. So it doesn't take long. If I now start the server, then it will run through, and we'll see it's adding the OpenNTF Domino API, adding in ZOTs there with its default 10 threads. And if we go to localhost 9080, we've got our Welcome to Liberty page there. So just kind of stepping back, why would you use Liberty? Why would you use CrossWorlds when you've got an HTTP server as part of Domino? Well, there's a couple of options, a couple of reasons that you might want to use it. Firstly, it allows you to run standard web applications. If you're doing it with Domino itself, then here's the OpenNTF Domino API demo application. We've got our various source folders and other folders like web content, webinf, but you then need to copy all of those files into a plugin, and in the plugin.xml you need to extend the com.ibm.pvc.webcontainer.application. So it's a container for a web application. Here, as you'll see when we install the OpenNTF Domino API demo database, you don't. You just develop it as a normal web application, which makes a number of things a lot easier. It's also a lot quicker to restart when you develop. Every time you save, it will unload the application and reload it on the fly. You can also use JRebel to hot reload, so it doesn't uninstall and reinstall the application each time. Because it's Liberty, you can run with Java 8 straight away. You don't have to wait for Domino Next at all. Plus, you can have multiple CrossWorlds setups, multiple Liberty servers running against a single Domino install. And it seems to be that a kind of common route is to have multiple Liberty servers, each containing a small number of applications, maybe even just one, so that you've got that kind of scalability and separation, but each with the same back end, in this case Domino for the NSF. So let's just install an application now. So we'll install the OpenNTF Domino API demo database. So that's a Maven project. First off, before I do that, in our Maven settings, we've got user settings. Now, typically, I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't kind of share those local Maven repositories and local Maven settings. Possibly you might have separate settings files, but there's probably no reason to have a separate Maven repository, because that Maven repository is basically downloading all the various jars that get compiled into a Maven project. And as you'll see with the OpenNTF Domino API demo application, there's quite a few. But in this situation, I'll create one that's completely separate. So I'll create a new folder and call it Maven repo, just to show it being completely separate. And we're also then going to need a settings file. Now that's documented in Maven and Liberty here. So this is has various settings that tell Liberty not to update, and it will then use that, and it also tells it where that Maven repository is. So let's just create our settings file. So it's just settings.xml. Yes, and we'll just paste that content in here. The only thing that you'll need to change here is just the location of that local repository. So here we're doing CrossWorlds Eclipse Maven repository, Maven repo. So we'll just add Eclipse in there and save that. So in our preferences, then we browse and use that other file instead. And you'll see that it's jumped to use that Maven repo. And yes, we'll just update the settings there. Now, I mentioned that there's that in order for an application to go through the CrossWorlds functionality, it's got to have this J2EE enabler jar file in the project. All that's doing, it's basically a web fragment.xml, so it's bits that get added into a web.xml. So it's adding in a filter so that all for particular CrossWorld specific requests, it goes through this filter class. It's got a filter mapping so that basically everything goes through that filter, and it's got an application listener which basically adds that application to the OpenNTF Domino API application list. So um, you can have the jar file, the J2E enabler jar file in there, or you could. There's nothing stopping you just copying that XML into a project, into the web.xml. This is just a web fragment.xml. It's just a fragment of it. So you could just copy that and put it into the web.xml. And those classes are mapping to classes that are in the core. So app servers.webapp.application listener requests filter. So mapping to those two. If you're not going to copy and paste them, if you're going to use the jar file, then for building with Maven, it's going to expect that jar file in the local repo. So in the CrossWorlds project, we've got the J2E enabler as a zip file, which is ready for being used from Maven. And if you're using Maven from the command line, then there's a command to convert a jar file to a Maven repo. This zip file has just basically already done that. So we will extract those files to that Maven repo. And it will actually go into org.openntf. We'll see that when it's extracted. So that's extracted those. And now if we go to Eclipse Maven repo org.openntf CrossWorlds web app J2E enabler, and this is that Maven repository. Doing that at this stage means that we're not then going to get any errors when we import the OpenNTF Domino API demo application in. Similarly, you could, in the OpenNTF Domino API application and in other applications, you could just copy, as I say, that web fragment.xml, the listener filter and filter mapping into the web.xml. And I may end up doing that for the OpenNTF Domino API demo application, just because it just avoids some of those problems, and it's not hugely difficult really. So the OpenNTF Domino API application is a Maven repository. So I'll go to the so again here I'll go to my Git repository, but you can download it. So I've got that in. I think it's, yes, it's there, and it's the Liberty one. So with a normal project, you can copy it into the workspace. A Maven project is not designed to be copied around. It's only designed to have one instance. That's you're not intending to be having multiple versions, because it's intended to be linked directly to source control. So this is now importing it And if we go to the details, then it's importing all the various projects like the Vardin ones, the Vardin add-ons. So this is going to take a little bit of time to import all of those. So it's just pulling all of those in at the moment. This is one of the benefits really of Maven, that you don't need to have all of those jar files in the application, so it makes it much smaller, and it just pulls them in when you download the repository. So if we look at the Domino version, for example, this is the one that's using OSGI worlds. Then if we just go back up to this level, then you'll see that that is it's 57 meg, or 58 meg just on its own, whereas the Liberty one, because it's pulling up files from the Maven repository, it's 3.5 meg. So we've now got them all in here. So it's now imported that, and we'll see that in the deployed resources in the web app, webinf lib, same as in an Xpages application, webinf lib is where you put all of the files, and that's already on the build path. And the data is that's just basically the code for importing files. It's just copied from the extension library demo. So it's got all of those. Deployed resources is where oh, let me go at it the other way. Java resources is where all your Java files are. So demo.ui.java, for example. Deployed resources is where everything else is. So the web.xml, this is where we're defining the dev time name that it should run under, where to find the extension library demo database, because it's using that as a template from which to copy instances, and we're telling it to create 10 instances in an ODA demo folder on the server. So that's the application. It's just a Vardin application, and I've done a few blog posts about that. It's a single page application. That's basically the demo UI page. Again, that's specified in the web.xml. So here it's specifying where that starting page is, demo UI, and then from there, then it adds in various other menu options, which are sub pages that get loaded, get lazy loaded, and an error view. So to add that to our Liberty server, we just right click, add and remove, and it's now available. Add it, finish, and that then loads that, publishes it to WebSphere, to the WebSphere server, the Liberty server, and it's now available. So if we come over here and now open it, we've now got our demo database up and running, and you can see the pages for session, database, view, which is a more recent one that I added in for the TLCC webinar, and ZOTS. The other ones I don't think help us. No, the other ones I still need to work, add more functionality to and add more content to. Um, Configuration settings, you can see all the various instances, all the various databases. Information, here you see all the public methods, and the blue ones are the ones that we've added. The black ones are available in the core Domino API. So get document by metaversal ID, for example, to get a single document directly to the server. And so there's various options. Database is a good one to see those on. So FT search range, parameters including enums to avoid typos. Source, if there's any code to be seen, then that would be shown there. But that's basically setting up your CrossWorlds server. So I've gone into a fair amount of depth with that. I would draw your attention also to the wiki, because in various places I go into much more depth on the why, and explaining the architecture, for example, explaining the structure of things, and a lot more background. If there's anything that you feel is missed, if there are any FAQs, then I would by all means let me know, and we can build that up and make it as full as possible, so that we can get lots of people working and using CrossWorlds to make it a more flexible and powerful environment, and another option. Thanks.